The House Committee on Appropriations will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Whitwer.
Here.
Representatives O'Neill. Brixey. Hood. Braybeck. Purry. Steckloff. Weiss. Martis. McKinney. Menser. Morgan. Price.
Here.
Skaggs.
Here.
Snyder. Wilson. Leitner.
Here.
Oh, I did. Rep. Morse. Here. Sorry. Representative Leitner.
Here.
Bolin. Green. Slaw. Borton. Fink. Cabot.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Kuhn.
Here.
Schutte.
Here.
Steele. Madam Chair, you have 26 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative O'Neill moves.
Representative Beeson.
All right. Representative O'Neill moves to excuse absent members. Without objection, the absent members will be excused from today's meeting. Representative Braybeck moves to approve the minutes from our November 1st meeting. There being no objection, the minutes are approved. Representative Martis moves to approve the minutes from our February 7th meeting. There being no objections, the minutes are approved. Before we get to today's agenda, I'm proposing an additional committee rule regarding testimony before this committee to clarify our process and procedures. You each have a copy of the proposed rule at your seat. Before we adopt the rule, we do have one member who would like to speak to that. Representative Fink.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I wanted to offer a couple of thoughts here. The first is that it is very important, I think, that we adopt some kind of rule here, and it's unfortunate that the habitual omission of a rule addressing this topic led to the House Representatives being sued and having to kind of react to a lawsuit before adopting this. With that said, I would like to see maybe a little more specificity in the rule rather than purely leaving the issue to the discretion of the committee chair. So I don't think I can support the rule at this time in the form it's in, but I do appreciate that the topic's been broached and that there's some movement towards, I think, a better circumstance than not having a rule at all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Fink. So Representative Brixey moves to adopt the committee rule. Will the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to adopt the proposed committee rule, Chair Whitwer.
Yes.
Representatives O'Neill.
Yes.
Brixey. Hood. Braybeck. Morse. Purry. Steckloff. Weiss. Martis. McKinney. Menser. Morgan. Price.
Yes.
Skaggs.
Yes.
Snyder. Wilson. Leitner. Bolin. Green.
No.
Slaw. Beeson. Borton. Fink. Cabot.
No.
DeBoer.
Yes.
Kuhn.
No.
Schutte.
No.
Steele. No. Madam Chair, you have 17 yeas, 5 nays, 6 pass. The proposed committee rule is adopted.
Thank you. Today is primarily an opportunity to have the House Fiscal Agency present us with a review and analysis of the governor's executive budget recommendation from last week. Here with us today is Director Mary Ann Cleary and Deputy Director Kevin Korstra. Thank you both for being here. I'll ask the members to hold any questions until the end. Mary Ann and Kevin, you can get started whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Also with me is my fine staff that helped me, assisted me with me, and will be available for questions at the end if there are further questions. So before you, you have our preliminary document. You all should have received that through an email last week. And you have a copy here just in case we need to point to a question or an answer or something to that. We may use that document. But before you, I have a PowerPoint that will walk you through big picture, the executive recommendation, sort of as I look at it, how my brain works as when we get the information, how I process it, and try to give it to you in a different form as which the governor and the budget director gave it to you yesterday. So it's very big picture. It doesn't include all of the details. In subcommittees, you will obviously look at all of the details and more. So I'm going to hit the highlights, some of the things that need statutory changes, balance sheet at the end to show you how it all works. So with that, Kevin's going to run my slides, and Kevin's going to be here to answer any of my DHHS questions. So last year, we'll start with the enacted budget last year. What I don't have on that slide is that the ending balance for '24 or the beginning balance of '25 was $326 million in general fund and $75.6 million of school aid fund. So a lot has changed since you enacted that budget. So some of the changes are right here for you. Some of the CREC happened in January. So there was additional revenue, general fund, and school aid fund for both fiscal year '23 and '24. You can see the additional revenues there. So those weren't available when the budget was crafted. Since then, book closing is about to happen. There's an additional $900 million, give or take, of lapses within general fund. Medicaid caseloads were adjusted, so the cost is less, which resulted in $120+ million of additional general fund. School aid lapses are going to be somewhere in the $152 million. So those are some of the changes that are now in play when the governor recommended her budget. So under her proposal, if you look at fiscal year '25, the beginning balance for general fund is $1.1 billion, and for school aid, it's $564 million. So those are what she's working with, in addition to some other things that she has proposed there. So the next slide is the governor's recommended '25 adjusted gross number of $80.7 billion. This pie just breaks out each of the departments or departments together to show you sort of what percentage of the total is for each, and DHHS is the largest by far at almost 47% of the budget is DHHS. All funding sources there. School aid is your second largest there. The next slide is the general fund. We show the general fund because that's really what has the most flexibility within a budget as to how to spend that. The governor's recommendation is $14.3 billion. Again, Health and Human Services is your largest component of the general fund budget, and then corrections, and then higher education after that. The next slide shows you a comparison of what was enacted in '24, which is our current year budget, and what the governor's recommendation is for '25 by your major fund sources. So general fund, there's a reduction from '24 to '25 of $882 million, or 5.8%. Excuse me. State restricted is $193 million increase. Most of that increase is related to DHHS and special financing. Within there, federal, there's another $1 billion increase in federal dollars, again, that mostly is related to DHHS and Medicaid restructuring, and that's at 3.1. So overall, the increase from '24 enacted to the current year, or to the executive rec, is a $320 million increase, or just a 0.4%. The next slide just shows you, just by department, what is in the general fund in '24 versus '25. You can look at that at your own leisure. Lots of what we need to remember here in '24 was there was a lot of one-time funding that was in departments that are now removed, and also the new Lifelong Education Advancement and Potential Department, or MyLEAP, is now part of the '25 budget, and so there's shifts happening between some of the departments to go into that new department. So the governor's budget recommends a supplemental to '24. There's three components to it. There's what we call a departmental supplemental, an education school aid supplemental, and then the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. Those three supplementals total $1.8 billion, $287 million for general fund, and $851 in state restricted, mostly DHHS and school aid related. So some of the details on the next slide. Again, these are just highlights. Within the departmental proposal, $1.6 billion of gross, $287 million of general fund. Largest component, again, is DHHS. Most of those are caseload related and special financing. So I think when you're in the DHHS, you'll hear a lot about the changes related to special financing, because that's a big component of the DHHS changes in the exec rec. There's $49 million of general fund for lump sum payments of up to $2,250 per eligible employee within the departments. There's $150 million for the targeted energy investment or the opening of the Palisades nuclear plant. This is augmented with the $150 million that is currently in the budget. So this brings that funding up to $300 million under this proposal. And then there's a mix of $125 million gross, almost $30 million of general fund throughout all of the other departments under this supplemental proposal. On the next slide is the school aid proposal for the supplemental. Again, it's just caseload related to the number of students, costs, and taxable value. And then there is an additional $30 million to fully fund the free school breakfast and lunch program within that proposal. It is strictly a school aid budget supplemental and not higher ed or community colleges. And then the final one is the Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is a yearly supplemental of $27 million. This is both land acquisitions and recreational projects within there. I think I saw the number was somewhere combined of 33 different projects that are being recommended. So those are all the changes recommended for fiscal year 24, their current fiscal year. So let's turn to fiscal year 25. So current services baseline means what does it take to fund what you have in 24 into 25? No other policy changes or program changes. And so those ones, there's $229 million for caseloads, mostly again related to DHHS, some for within MDE. There's $128 million of general fund increase for state employees' compensation, new contract, 5% increase in salary and wages. That's what that covers. And then there's another category called just all other, $135 million general fund. The gross is larger than that. But these are things like contract extensions or increases, the Indigent Defense Commission for the standards 1 through 5 and 8 that need additional funding, the veteran homes, what's it cost to pay for them in 25 versus 24, and that's estimated at $11 million there. So those are what we call current services baseline adjustments that potentially need to happen. I think in your subcommittee discussions, you'll look at some of those current services baselines a little bit more to get a little better feel as to whether they're a policy decision or just something that needs to continue and needs an additional funding request. So then on to the governor's sort of bigger proposals. So it's broken out into ongoing and one-time revenues or allocations. So under the governor's recommendation, there's almost $438 million of what is called investments or ongoing funds expected. If you pay for them in 25, you'll go into 26. A majority of the proposal is within DHHS, about $215 million. Underneath that are some of the bigger requests within that $15 million. It's not all of them, it's just the bigger ones. Something called the CCBHC expansion. Those are behavioral health clinics, child caring institutions, energy assistance program, the non-direct care wage increase. I think that's an 85-cent increase for non-direct care wages. There's $112.5 million of university funding. Couple different things going on in here. First, there's a 2.5% increase in operations, $36 million in scholarships, and then there's a couple fund shifts. We'll talk about the TANF in a little bit, but there's a TANF swap with general fund of $128 million there, and then there's a swap of general fund and school aid, so additional school aid put in of $93.8 million. So also within there, of that scholarship money, there's the $30 million for the Michigan Advancement Scholarship. This is where the community college guarantee exists or is placed in there. There's $37.9 million gross, $19 million for hourly childcare rate and reimbursement rate of 10% within that, the new MyLeap program or department, and $12.9 million or $13 million for the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission for implementation of 6 and 7. These are the last two standards per statute to be put into place. So that would bring, I think, the MIDC total funding to close to $300 million now for all of the standards that have been recommended in statute. Next is the general fund one-time allocation. The governor's recommendation is $763 million. Below are the largest department one-time, obviously not all of them, but within there too, then within the department, what are your largest increases? MDOT, $185 million. $95 million of that is for federal match. $55 million of the one-time is also for local bridge and culvert projects. Within Leo, there's $131 million of one-time. The $25 million development at Right Site and the $20 million workforce needs are new requests, and there's the $20 million for the business attraction and the Going Pro are enhancements to the existing programs. Within Eagle, there's a $90 million one-time. There's $90 million of one-time. $40 million again is for federal match for lead lines. $25 million for electric vehicle charging stations. Within DHHS, there's almost $78 million, $14 million for family planning, local grants, $10 million for a nursing loan repayment program. DTMB has almost $77 million, so $31 million of that is to a flexible spending account for state match. So currently, state employees can put money into a flexible spending account. This would be a $1-for-$1 match for employees up to $2,500. So the state will put in $2,500 if you put in $2,500 into your flexible spending account. There's also a $25 million deposit into the Make It in Michigan fund. Currently, there is about $350 million within that fund right now. So the governor's asking for another $25 million. In the MyLeap program, there's a $60 million one-time allocation for a pilot program for child care subsidies for child care workers. And the governor's recommending a $100 million deposit into the budget stabilization fund. This would put the stabilization fund somewhere around the $2.2 billion in fiscal year '25. So in education funding, there's a lot going on in education funding. There's about almost $1 billion of investments, $950 million of one-time. I will say a lot of the one-time that was considered one-time in school aid is continued into fiscal year '25. So I haven't listed a lot of that. A lot of it is just continuations. I'll highlight a couple things within education school aid. There's $316 million increase for foundation allowances. It's a $241 per pupil increase, 2.5%. That would put the per pupil amount at $9,849 per student. The governor is recommending a reduction to the cyber school foundation allowance to 80% of the foundation. That would move those foundation allowances down to $7,879 per student. I will mention that the governor does continue funding for the per pupil mental health school safety grants. Does switch it up a little bit to $150 million is considered ongoing, but and $150 million of one time. And then I will point out $106 million for the Great Start Readiness Program. There's probably 3 or 4 things happening within that $106 million for Great Start. Part of that is per pupil increases. Part of that is, I think, salary increases too for those that run those programs. On the next slide are the MIPSers changes within school aid and community colleges. $675 million is the gross reduction for what we call other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. It is moving. It will be fully funded at 100% in fiscal year '26. The governor's asking that we make the change in '25 and assume that to be 100% funded in '25. We'll take a statutory change there. The estimated savings to the state is $632 million for districts, and community colleges, it's almost $44 million. Also within the MIPSers, the governor's recommending that you reduce the payroll contribution that districts and community colleges pay off of the payroll from 20.96% to 20%. That's a cost to the state of about $100 million. That one you can do without a statutory change on that change. Revenue sharing, the governor's recommended a 5% increase for both CVTs, cities, villages, and townships, and counties. Also, 2 one-time appropriations. The first one is $11 million for local public safety at 2%. I believe that is also in the current year. And then an additional 3% one-time for CVTs and counties that have either obligated, expended, or have not received, or chose not to receive federal dollars, ARP dollars. So if a district or a city or a village or a county has obligated that money, they will receive a 3% one-time lump sum. There is current language in the bill right now for a 1% lump sum for local ARP. There is a reporting requirement so that the state will know whether Treasury will know whether the CVTs or the counties how much they have obligated or expended, or chose not to take that. That report's not due to the legislature until the end of March. So the next slide are the things I talked about earlier, sort of revenue adjustments that are not general fund. They're restricted, with the exception of the last one. So within Eagle, there's a recommended increase in the landfill tipping fee from 36 cents per ton to $5 per ton. It brings an additional $80 million. Her budget is predicated on all of these things happening, so her proposal does assume all these. Within Leo, there's a $60 million one-time use of funds within the Venture Michigan investment proceeds. I believe there's about $100 million sitting in that fund right now, to start a new Michigan Innovation Fund or an Evergreen Fund, which will provide capital support for startups. Within DNR, the governor's asking that you change the recreational passport to an opt-out. So when you get your vehicle registration, you can check right now if you want to pay the $14 for a passport. She's asking that be an automatic check, and that you would have to opt out to not have to pay for that. And then veterans would be exempted and get an automatic passport. This would bring in an additional $17 million within DNR. And the governor also has recommended one sort of tax change that would affect the income tax. It's a caregiver tax credit. It's up to $5,000. You can exempt, or you can claim $5,000 for caregiving expenses. Estimated to cost $22.5 million, or reduction in revenue, I should say, of $22.5 million in fiscal year '24 and $37.5 million in fiscal year '25 and ongoing. That would be an ongoing reduction. My last slide before the balance sheet is sort of a policy decision within the executive recommendation, is the temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF. Currently, there is funding within the scholarship programs in higher education and administration, DHHS administration, of $168 million. The recommendation is to first change the funding source for those programs, which I had mentioned earlier, for scholarships, to make that general fund, and for the DHHS administration at $40 million, make that general fund. and then take that money and fund DHHS programs, cash assistance, emergency relief, prenatal, homeless centers, $104 million there, and then in MyLeap, the child care, the rate increase, foster child care inspections, $63.5 million shift there. So that's all the sort of the big picture that I wanted to share with you. So how does this all relate into what it looks like on the balance sheet? How much is left? How that plays out? So the first one is your general fund. So looking at fiscal year 24, you can see up under resources, there's the caregiver tax credit, the 22.5, the 37, and the 37 again. Under the expenditures, you can see the proposed supplemental of 287.5. I will say there is a lawsuit, a UIA lawsuit, anticipated to cost somewhere around $142 million the state will have to pay, that we have added to the balance sheet. So you can see then the balance at the end of 24 is the 1.1 billion. So then if you go up to 25, you can see all of the different pieces that I've just talked about. So again, you have the caregiver, you have your revenue sharing under your resources, and then I break down under the expenditures, your baseline, your caseload, your investments. There were a few reductions within there that I didn't talk about. They were smaller. How much goes to the school aid fund, and then your one-time, and then your BSF. So that totals $14.4 billion. So an estimated balance of $10.8 million left on the balance sheet. So then I did go over to 26 to see what 26 looks like based on the information we received from there. I will say the governor had talked about this, the research and development tax credit. That's a fiscal year 26 issue under their proposal. Still waiting for a little more detail on that one. And then what does it mean to go forward? More of a baseline for 26 under your expenditures. We are estimating to be about $330 million left on the balance sheet from what we know today for the general fund. And then under the school aid fund balance sheet, I'll highlight if you start on fiscal year 2024, the estimated balance is $564 million. You carry that forward into 25. You look at all your revenue sources for 25, and then you, again, break down your expenditures to your ongoing, some of our correct baseline adjustments, our investments, the school aid MIPSers change, and the one-time, and then add in the community college higher ed school aid pieces, to get a balance of $12 billion there, or $12 million, excuse me. And then we look forward into 26, did the same exercise based on consensus revenue estimates, removing your one-time, what's your baseline. And you can see your MIPSers is an ongoing savings, and the estimated balance there is $227 million. One thing I will note on here is this restricted reserve funds. So within the 24 budget, a fair amount of money of school aid fund was put into sub-accounts and then used to pay for some of the programs within school aid. That is funded at the same level in 24 as it is in 25. We estimate that there's about still $1.8 billion left in those restricted reserve accounts. So they're like the infrastructure fund, there's the rainy day school aid fund, there's the declining enrollment fund. So all of those funds total about $1.8 billion left within there. So with that, Madam Chair, that was a very big highlight of the executive recommendation. I have my wonderful staff with me, and we will try to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mary Ann, and for all your staff for all your hard work that you put into this. We do have a few questions. Representative Fink?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two very quick ones, if that's okay. The second, okay. So the first one is on the higher ed. I see the increase it doesn't look like it's even probably an inflationary level increase, so it's not a huge amount. But what I do wonder, I always worry about whether our state universities can, clearly answer the question of why they're important to the state itself. In other words, not to interests outside of the state, but the residents of the state. Is there any new accountability language of any kind in the governor's executive recommendation? And I understand we're early enough, you might not,
Yeah.
and maybe there's not even a
Have
textual
Perry
answer
ask
to that
that real
yet.
quick.
Thank you, Representative. Perry Zelak with House Fiscal. In short, no, there was no new proposed language around accountability measures. That sounds like hitting on the topic that you are asking about.
Okay, and then my second one is, honestly, I'm asking you to refresh my own recollection on the automatic enrollment in the recreation passport. I thought that we did this.
No, that was a proposal a few years back. The governor had tried to make it an automatic
An opt-out
opt-in.
instead of.
Yeah, and it started out as it's always been an opt-out. There has been proposals in the past to make it an automatic opt-in first, so no, it's
Okay,
an opt-out.
and then the resident veteran exemption, that would mean that veterans, is it people who have the veterans license plates?
Sure. I don't think even, just a veteran, if you can show that you're a veteran, you would be automatically given a passport.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rep. Bolin?
Thank you very much. I have a question in regards to the MIPSers. I know we've been doing a very good job of trying to pay down the debt over the last couple of years. But my question is, I'd like to know what the actual number is, how much money we've put towards debt reduction, and then how much we've actually reduced the debt.
I think we would need a time frame from, like, a starting point, right? I don't, on that, I'm going to just throw Ben up here for a minute, too, because it gets a little more complicated. I mean, so there has been payments toward the pension side, big payments under Representative Albert's proposals in the past. Right now, this proposal just makes the payments that are necessary. I'll throw it over to Ben on the OPEB piece.
Thank you.
This might not directly answer your question. I mean, are you asking just in the current fiscal year in the proposal, how much we're,
No, I'm
Okay.
actually looking, since we've had this a little bit more aggressive approach, and I guess I'll give a timeline. I'd like it from like 2018. So I've served on the committee since 2019. This has always been a big priority for me to make sure that we're, wherever we can, limiting those long-term obligations and paying ahead. And so there's been a lot of conversation lately. And I mean, there are two distinct numbers, right? How much we put towards it and then how much we're actually reducing the debt in both the OPEB and in the pensions.
yeah, and I think sometimes, especially when you talk about pensions, that's difficult to sort of delineate because of, we've made, the assumptions in the system have been far more conservative. We've ratcheted down the payroll growth assumption. Our rate of return has come from 8% down to 6%. So even though we are putting more money into it on paper, the funded ratio has been sort of treading water, same with the unfunded liability. So identifying how much we've paid down is a little bit difficult to calculate, but certainly we can compile sort of what payments we've made over that period of time.
And just
sort of like what the,
notation,
yeah.
when we actually put those better practices into place also, like the adoption mortality tables, the assumed percentage interest, the smoothing,
Yeah.
just a notation so that when we're looking at it, I think we get a much more realistic picture of.
sure.
And also how important it is to continue on a very, in my opinion, a very aggressive manner to continue to reduce that liability. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Steele?
Thank you for the report. My question is on the Health and Human Services, and I see that there's an increase in the federal funding and an increase in the general funds, and I know there's a match that goes into, when we get the federal funds, we have to match it with general fund dollars. So not just the increase that we see this year, but an overall, what is the amount of general fund dollars that we spend to match the federal funds that we receive? So of that $6 billion, $6.7 billion, how much of that is actually match money? Just to see how much we're spending separate from that. Thank you.
This won't provide the full number, because there's more than just Medicaid that the state has to use for match, but 3.8 billion is general fund used to match for the Medicaid program. But there, like I said, there's then additional programs that we'd then have to follow up with.
So
Provide-
it's 3.8 plus. And if you, maybe not right now, but just, and I don't need the exact amount, but is it 4, is it 5? Just curious to see how much we're using of general funds as match dollars
Sure.
for all.
We can follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And our last question is Representative Weiss.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I also had a question on the MIPSRS changes. So first of all, just a point of clarification, the 100 million increase to go from a 20.96 to a 20% for districts for their costs, is that similar to the half percentage reimbursement, MIPSRS reimbursement that we had in the budget last year, but it's just bringing it up to a full percent?
I don't recall what it was, so we're going to let Jacqueline answer that.
Jacqueline Mullen, House Fiscal. Yes, Representative, it's similar to that.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And then also another question off of that. I know part of the changes that were made in the past to increase the level of funding for the OPEB liability was to put a 3% charge onto school employees to pay for that. Do we know under this current proposal if the school employees would still be required to continue to pay that 3%?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you again, Marianne, and everyone that came along with you. I appreciate all of your work again and answering all these questions.
Absolutely, and you can reach out to our office for any more specific details, and good luck with your subcommittee deliberations.
Great, great, thank you. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the second item on today's agenda and take up House Bill 4842, sponsored by Representative Price. This bill eliminates the requirement that pools of obligation issued by the State Building Authority be fully payable to creditors within 5 years. It's been a few months since we took testimony on this bill last November, so I want to make sure we provide members with another opportunity to ask questions to Treasury. Rob Mass from the department is in the audience. He does support the bill. He can provide clarification if we need it. Is there anyone that would like to hear a quick reboot from Rob? Great. We will move along. Seeing no questions or concerns, Representative Price moves to report House Bill 4842 with recommendation. Will the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to report House Bill 4842, Chair Whitwer.
Yes.
Representatives O'Neill. Brixey. Hood. Braybeck. Morse. Hurry. Steckloff. Weiss. Martis. McKinney. Menser. Morgan. Price. Skaggs. Snyder. Wilson. Leitner. Bolin. Green. Slaw. Beeson.
No.
You said no?
No.
Horton.
Pass.
Fink. Cavett.
No.
DeBoer.
Yes.
Kuhn.
No.
Shudi.
No.
Steele. No. Madam Chair, you have 18 yeas, 8 nays, 2 pass. House Bill 4842 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you. The bill will be reported as said. Seeing no further business, the House Appropriations Committee stands adjourned.